He messed around and this happens. Horse Guards, Royal Guard, King's Guard, Horse, London, 2025. There was something magical about the idea of traditions that had lasted for hundreds of years. So, when he finally saved enough money for a trip to the capital, he knew exactly where he wanted to go first: Horse Guards Parade. He had seen pictures online, videos of the royal guard standing tall on their majestic horses, and he imagined the thundering sound of hooves on cobblestones. Now, standing at the edge of the parade ground in real life, he felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. The morning air was crisp and clean. Sunlight glinted off the polished boots of the guards and the shiny metal on their helmets. The guards stood motionless on their horses, looking straight ahead, their faces carefully neutral. The horses themselves were incredible. They were tall, strong, and beautifully groomed, their manes shining in the morning sun. Some were black, others brown, but all of them had the same disciplined stance, alert yet calm. The entire scene felt almost unreal, like stepping into a living history book. James had read that the horses were trained for years to remain calm during all kinds of distractions: shouting crowds, flashing cameras, and sudden movements. The guards, he knew, were trained to remain perfectly still, even when hundreds of tourists were watching them. It sounded impossible, but here they were in front of him, looking as if nothing could disturb them. As he stepped closer to the barrier that separated the public from the parade ground, James felt the temptation to get a better view. Just a few steps closer, he thought. After all, he told himself, everyone wanted a good photo. He wanted to capture the details: the way the horse's muscles moved under its shiny coat, the glint of the guard's sword, the proud, upright posture of the rider. Tourists around him were doing the same, taking photos and videos, whispering in excitement. But James's curiosity was different this time. He leaned over the barrier slightly and whispered a joke to his friend, trying to see if he could get a reaction from one of the horses. "I wonder what happens if it moves," he said, laughing quietly. He didn't mean any harm. He had no idea that his small action was starting a chain of events that could turn the serene morning into chaos. One of the guards, a man with sharp eyes and an equally sharp sense of duty, noticed James edging closer. Sergeant Collins, a veteran of the Royal Guard, had seen this many times before. Tourists didn't always understand the rules. Some thought the horses were like statues, immobile and predictable. But these animals were powerful, intelligent, and trained to react to danger. Collins raised his voice, calm but firm. "Sir, please step back from the barrier." James heard the warning but didn't take it seriously. He waved his hand, smiling, thinking it was part of the ceremony. "It's okay," he whispered to his friend. "He won't do anything." His friend looked uneasy, noticing how close James had gotten to the massive black stallion named Titan. Titan's eyes were alert, ears twitching slightly, muscles tense. The horse was used to tourists, but he could sense energy and movement nearby. James crouched slightly to get a better angle for a photo, his camera ready. He thought, just one good shot, that's all I need. He didn't realize that every movement he made, even if small, sent signals to the horse. Titan shifted his weight slightly, a warning James couldn't see. The guard noticed the subtle movement too and took a step closer, hand resting lightly on the horse's reins. At that moment, James felt invincible. He had been careful before on trips, cautious about crowds and dangers. But here he felt daring. He whispered another joke, bending just a bit more over the barrier. He imagined the perfect photo, the shot that would make his friends jealous back home. The air was filled with excitement, laughter, and the soft sound of hooves shifting on the stone. James didn't notice how tense the scene had become, how the guard's posture had stiffened, how the horse's nostrils flared slightly. Around him, other tourists were starting to watch the interaction. Some smiled, thinking James was joking with the guards. Others looked concerned. One older woman murmured to her companion, "He's too close." That horse could kick or step back any second. James ignored it, focusing entirely on the picture he wanted. He crouched slightly, leaned forward, and whispered, "Just one shot, Titan, just one." Time seemed to slow. The sunlight reflected off the guard's helmet, making it shine almost like gold. James clicked his camera rapidly, capturing images of the horse, the guard, the shiny parade ground. He felt a thrill in his chest. Nothing had happened. Everything was perfect, or so he thought. But Sergeant Collins was not relaxed. He took a small step forward, positioning himself between James and Titan. "Sir, please," he said again, more firmly this time. His voice carried authority, calm yet unyielding. James laughed softly and waved his hand dismissively. He didn't mean to be rude. He just thought the guard was overreacting. Titan shifted again, slightly more impatient. The massive horse was trained for ceremonial duties, but he was also aware of sudden movements around him. He didn't panic, but his muscles tensed, his hooves shifted, and his ears flicked backward. Collins noticed immediately, his hand tightening on the reins. He gave a small, subtle signal to Titan, a reminder of discipline and calm. James crouched lower, whispering to his friend about how amazing it was to be this close. He didn't realize the tiny signs of warning, the horse's shifting weight, the flick of his tail, the tension in the guard's stance. It was a delicate balance, one that James was unaware he was disturbing. Around them, tourists continued to snap photos, some oblivious, some curious. Children pointed at the horses, fascinated, while parents kept a careful watch. The whole scene looked peaceful from a distance. But in that small circle near Titan, the energy had changed. James's excitement, his jokes, his leaning over the barrier, all of it was creating tension the horse could sense. And that's when the moment that would change everything was quietly forming. James didn't see it. He was focused entirely on the camera, on the photo, on capturing history in a single frame. But Titan, the proud black stallion, felt it. He was aware, alert, and ready. The guards were ready too, but James was unaware that he had crossed the invisible line of safety that separated curiosity from danger. It was a beautiful morning in London, calm, sunny, and filled with history. But beneath that calm, the stage was set for an unforgettable moment, one that James would never forget, and one that would teach him an important lesson about respect, tradition, and the power of the animals he admired so much. James had been so focused on capturing the perfect foe that he barely noticed the tension building around him. Titan, the black stallion, was alert and uneasy. Every twitch of his ears, every shift of his powerful legs, was a silent signal of discomfort. The other horses in the parade remained calm, but Titan's body language was a quiet warning. Sergeant Collins, trained to read these signs, knew immediately that James was too close, but the tourist did not understand. "Step back, sir, please," Collins said again, his voice louder this time. He moved a little closer to create a physical barrier between James and Titan. Tourists around them began to notice the interaction. Some whispered to their companions, pointing at James, while others simply watched in curiosity. They did not understand the risk, but they could sense that something unusual was happening. James finally looked up from his camera and saw the guard standing firm and serious. He laughed nervously, waving his hand. "I'm just taking a photo," he said, trying to sound casual. He thought the guard was overreacting. After all, the horse had not moved in any dangerous way yet. James didn't see the subtle signs Titan was showing. The flick of an ear, the slight tension in his muscles, the way he shifted his weight. The scene might have seemed calm to the casual observer, but Sergeant Collins knew better. These horses were enormous, strong, and quick. Even a small, sudden movement from a tourist could startle them. Collins had been trained for years to recognize the early signs of agitation in ceremonial horses, and Titan was now showing exactly those signs. He could sense the nervous energy from James, the leaning, the bending, the laughter, all signals of unpredictability that a horse reads instinctively. Collins stepped a little closer to Titan, gently tugging the reins to keep the horse calm. "Please, sir," he said again, this time with authority that left no room for argument. His voice carried not just over the quiet crowd but also over the thumping of hooves on the stone ground. James finally noticed how serious the guard was. For the first time, he realized this was not just about etiquette, it was about safety. Still, James smiled nervously. "It's fine," he said, trying to lighten the moment. He crouched slightly for another angle, whispering to his friend about how amazing this moment was. The crowd around them had started to sense that something was about to happen. Phones were raised, cameras ready, not knowing what to expect. James felt a rush of excitement. Nothing had happened yet, so he thought it was safe to continue. But the truth was far from safe. Titan's large, dark eyes were fixed on James. The horse's muscles were taut. His hooves shifted slightly as he adjusted his weight. He was not angry, but he was aware of the potential danger. Horses are incredibly perceptive animals. They can feel nervousness, excitement, and sudden movements. Titan could sense that James's actions were unpredictable. Collins knew that if James leaned even slightly more or moved suddenly, it could trigger a reaction. James, oblivious, continued to lean closer. "Just one more photo," he whispered. He thought he was being careful, but his presence alone was enough to unsettle Titan. The horse's ears twitched backward, a small but clear warning. Collins moved closer, his hand resting lightly on Titan's mane. The guard's calm presence was meant to reassure the horse, but James's movement countered the effect. The crowd now included parents holding children, couples taking selfies, and tourists who had traveled from different parts of the world. Everyone sensed the tension, even if they didn't understand it fully. Some started whispering, "He's too close." That horse might react. James, however, focused only on the camera. He was determined to get a photo that would capture the grandeur of the horse guard's parade perfectly. Collins, sensing that this situation could escalate quickly, called out once more. "Sir, step back immediately." This time his voice carried urgency. Titan's muscles tensed, a subtle but powerful shift. The horse's eyes widened slightly, nostrils flaring. These were all signs that, to a trained observer, indicated a potential reaction if the tourist did not move away. James froze for a moment, realizing the guard was serious. He looked at Titan and noticed how immense and strong the stallion appeared up close. The horse was beautiful, majestic, and clearly aware of his surroundings. James's heart raced. He had never been this close to such a powerful animal. He felt both awe and nervousness, but curiosity still got the better of him. "I just want one more shot," he whispered, almost to himself. He leaned slightly, trying to adjust the camera angle for a better perspective. He didn't yet understand that this tiny movement could be dangerous. Titan's hooves shifted again, and the horse let out a soft snort, another subtle warning. Collins moved closer, gently guiding Titan to maintain a safe distance, but James continued to lean forward, unaware of the risk he was creating. The crowd around them became more attentive. Tourists whispered to each other, pointing their phones toward the scene. A few parents quietly moved their children back, sensing that this interaction could lead to trouble. The tension in the air was noticeable, though not loud, just a quiet anticipation like the calm before a storm. James's friend tried to warn him. "Maybe you should step back," he said quietly. The guard looked serious, but James waved him off, focusing on the camera. "I'm fine," he whispered. "I just need this one photo." He didn't realize that his insistence was increasing the tension for both the guard and Titan. Collins, patient but firm, knew he had to act before the situation escalated. He moved closer, standing between James and Titan, maintaining a calm but authoritative presence. His experience told him that even a small stumble or sudden movement from James could startle the horse. Collins had trained for years for moments like this, moments when a tourist's curiosity could lead to a serious incident. Titan, sensing the seriousness of the guard's movements, shifted slightly but remained under control. The horse was trained for thousands of ceremonial events, but even the most disciplined animals have limits. Collins gave Titan a subtle signal with the reins, a reminder to stay calm, and the horse responded. But the tension in the air was palpable. James's continued closeness, his leaning, and his laughter were creating an invisible pressure. Time seemed to stretch. Every small movement James made was noticed by Titan and Collins. The crowd watched, sensing the unusual energy. James was excited, thinking the horse and guard were just part of the scenery, not realizing the careful balance that was being maintained. Titan's ears flicked backward again, and his large, dark eyes followed James's every movement. Finally, Collins raised his voice once more. "Sir, step back from the barrier immediately." His tone was no longer polite. It carried the urgency of someone who had seen what could happen if ignored. James froze, realizing for the first time that the situation was serious. His excitement faltered, replaced by a sudden awareness of the potential danger. He slowly moved back, heart racing. The crowd seemed to breathe collectively, sensing that the tension was easing. Titan relaxed slightly, his body returning to a calm stance, while Collins kept a careful watch on both the tourist and the horse. James felt a mix of relief and embarrassment. He had been so focused on the perfect photo that he had almost ignored the very real danger in front of him. As he stepped back, James realized the importance of rules, traditions, and respect. The ceremonial horses were powerful, disciplined, and magnificent, but they were not toys. The guards were not just for show, they were trained to maintain the safety of everyone around them. James's heart still raced, but now it was mixed with admiration and understanding. The crowd slowly returned to normal, but the moment had left a lasting impression on James. He whispered to his friend, "I didn't realize I was so close." His friend nodded, relieved that nothing had happened. James took a few careful photos from a safe distance, capturing the majesty of the parade without risking anyone's safety. The morning continued, with the guards and horses performing their duties flawlessly, unaware of how close the situation had come to being dangerous. James learned a powerful lesson about patience, respect, and awareness, one that he would carry with him for the rest of his life. He realized that curiosity was wonderful, but only when balanced with caution. By the time James left Horse Guards Parade that morning, he had more than just photos. He had a story of awe, tension, and respect. A story that reminded him that beauty and tradition demand careful observation, not reckless curiosity. The memory of Titan's watchful eyes and the guard's calm authority stayed with him long after he walked away, a lesson he would never forget. James had stepped back, feeling a mixture of relief and embarrassment. He thought the tension had passed and that he had learned his lesson. The crowd around Horse Guards Parade seemed to relax as well, some returning to their photos, others chatting quietly. But James's curiosity wasn't fully satisfied. He wanted to see Titan up close again, to capture a photo that truly showed the horse's size and strength. The morning sun shone brightly, casting long shadows across the cobblestones. The ceremonial horses moved slightly, shifting their weight, while the guards remained motionless and disciplined. The scene was mesmerizing, so much so that James forgot the earlier warning. His eyes were drawn once more to Titan, whose powerful black coat glimmered in the sunlight. James whispered to himself, "Just one more shot, and I'll be careful this time." He slowly edged closer, telling himself he would pay attention now. But curiosity has a way of ignoring caution. As he crouched for a better angle, he didn't realize that his movement was being noticed, not just by Titan, but by Sergeant Collins as well. Collins's eyes narrowed slightly. He had been in this situation many times and knew that a tourist's fascination could easily become dangerous. The horse sensed it too. Titan's ears twitched backward again, his nostrils flaring slightly. His muscles tensed beneath the polished saddle, preparing for any sudden movement. James leaned a little closer, adjusting the camera, unaware of the subtle warning signals. He whispered to his friend, "Just one more, then we'll step back." His friend looked uneasy, glancing at the guard, who was now subtly shifting his position to ensure Titan remained calm. Collins did not speak this time. He relied on small gestures, keeping the horse under control while watching James carefully. Suddenly, a small movement from James, a shift of his foot on the cobblestone, was enough to startle Titan. The horse shifted his weight sharply, hooves scraping the ground. Collins quickly reacted, giving Titan a gentle tug on the reins to steady him. But James, focused entirely on the camera, did not notice the subtle signs. Titan's ears were flat now, his large eyes wide and attentive, and his powerful legs braced beneath him. The tension in the horse's body was unmistakable. James crouched lower to frame the perfect shot. "This will be the best one yet," he whispered. He was oblivious to the danger he was creating. Around him, tourists were starting to sense the unease. Some paused their own photos, watching the interaction silently. Others murmured warnings to their companions. A small child tugged at their parent's sleeve, pointing nervously at the scene. But James's focus remained entirely on the camera and Titan. Collins's patience was running thin. He had tried verbal warnings earlier, but James had ignored them. Now, Collins needed to act quickly to prevent an incident. He stepped slightly to the side, positioning himself directly between James and Titan, his hand resting lightly on the horse's neck. Titan responded to the guard's presence, calming slightly, but the situation remained delicate. One wrong move could trigger a reaction from the powerful horse. James, sensing no immediate danger, leaned forward again for another angle. Titan shifted again, more noticeably this time, and let out a soft snort. It was a subtle warning, but James did not notice. The horse's tail flicked slightly, a signal of irritation or unease. Collins's eyes narrowed. He could feel the energy in the horse, the tension building as the tourist continued to move closer. James whispered to his friend again, trying to capture the perfect image. "Just one more," he said softly. He did not realize that this single decision could lead to an accident. Titan's muscles tensed further, ready to react to any sudden movement. The horse's hooves scraped against the stone cobblestones, the sound echoing slightly across the parade ground. Collins knew he had to stay alert. The crowd was now completely attentive. Tourists paused their activities, sensing that something unusual was happening. Phones were raised, some to capture the moment, others to record what might happen next. Parents held their children a little closer, and a few visitors whispered warnings to each other. The atmosphere was no longer casual curiosity, it was tense anticipation. James finally noticed the guard standing between him and Titan. Okay, he said, stepping back slightly. He smiled nervously, thinking the situation was under control. But it was not over. Titan's energy was still high, his body ready to respond to any sudden movement. Collins's hand remained on the reins, guiding the horse, while his eyes never left James. James crouched down again for one last shot, trying to capture Titan's face from an angle that highlighted the horse's strength. He did not realize that this small crouch was enough to trigger the horse's instincts. Titan shifted more sharply this time, a warning movement that could escalate if not handled carefully. Collins immediately reacted, giving a gentle but firm tug on the reins to steady the horse. Suddenly, a small stumble from James, his foot slipping slightly on the cobblestones, caused Titan to react instinctively. The horse stamped one powerful hoof, barely missing James's foot. The crowd gasped. Some tourists shouted warnings while others froze, unsure of what to do. James stumbled backward, hitting the nearby barricade with a soft thud. He was shaken but not seriously injured. Collins acted instantly. He placed himself firmly between James and Titan, calming the horse with controlled movements. "Step back now," he shouted, his voice carrying over the crowd. James, finally realizing the danger, scrambled to regain his balance and moved back several steps. His heart raced, adrenaline flooding his body. The reality of what had just happened hit him hard. He had been lucky. The crowd slowly recovered, some clapping quietly in relief. James's friend rushed to his side, checking that he was okay. "Are you all right?" they asked, their voice trembling slightly. James nodded, still catching his breath. He had learned a lesson the hard way. Curiosity could be dangerous if not tempered with caution and respect. Titan, now calm again under Collins's careful guidance, shifted slightly but remained disciplined. The horse was a trained ceremonial animal, used to handling many tourists and unusual situations, but even the most patient animals have limits. Collins gave Titan a few gentle reassurances, and the horse returned to a calm stance, ears flicking forward, eyes relaxed. James stepped back fully, taking a few deep breaths. He looked around at the crowd, at the guards, and at the other horses, realizing how much order and discipline went into maintaining the ceremony. It was not just a display for tourists, it was a carefully orchestrated tradition, with rules and respect built in to protect everyone involved. He whispered to his friend, "I didn't realize it could have been worse." His friend nodded, relief visible on their face. "Yeah, you were really lucky. That horse could have hurt you." James felt a mixture of gratitude and shame. He had been lucky, but he had also learned a valuable lesson about respecting boundaries and understanding the power of the animals and guards around him. Collins approached James after a moment, his expression serious but not angry. "Sir, it's important to remember," he said calmly. "These horses are trained and disciplined, but they are still powerful animals. They respond to energy and movement, and even small actions can trigger a reaction. Please, always respect the barriers and instructions." James nodded, feeling the weight of the lesson. By the time the scene settled, James had stepped back to a safe distance. He took a few careful photos, this time paying attention to the rules and maintaining respect for the guards and horses. The rest of the morning passed without incident, the ceremonial horses moving gracefully and the guards performing their duties flawlessly. But James carried with him the memory of how close he had come to causing an accident, a vivid lesson in caution and respect. The experience left a lasting impression on him. He realized that admiration alone was not enough. It must be paired with understanding and restraint. Curiosity was wonderful, but only when balanced with awareness of one's surroundings. James walked away from Horse Guards Parade that morning with more than just photographs. He carried a story, a lesson, and a newfound respect for the majesty and discipline of the ceremonial guards and their horses. James thought the worst was over. He had stepped back, taken a few careful photos, and even thanked Sergeant Collins quietly for the warning. His heart was still racing, but he told himself he had learned his lesson. The crowd around Horse Guards Parade seemed to relax, returning to their usual chatter and camera clicks. For a moment, the morning felt peaceful again. But James's curiosity, stubborn as it was, had not fully disappeared. The grandeur of the parade was mesmerizing. The sunlight glinted off the guards' polished helmets, and the horses shifted their hooves with elegant precision. James's eyes were drawn back to Titan, the proud black stallion, who now stood calmly under Collins's watchful eye. The horse's muscles were relaxed, and his ears twitched forward as he observed the crowd. From a safe distance, Titan looked magnificent, almost untouchable in his discipline and grace. James whispered to his friend, "Maybe I can get one more close-up just from a little angle over here." His friend looked worried, noticing how James's eyes were still fixed on the horse. "Are you sure? You almost caused trouble earlier," the friend warned softly. James nodded quickly. I'll be careful, I promise. But his idea of being careful was still risky. He edged closer to the barrier, crouching slightly to frame the perfect shot. Titan's ears flicked back slightly, a subtle warning that James did not notice. The horse's nostrils flared, sensing the small, nervous energy from the tourist. Collins noticed the movement immediately. His eyes narrowed slightly, and he shifted his stance to position himself more directly between James and Titan. Around them, the crowd began to notice the tension. Tourists whispered quietly, pointing at James and the guards. Children stopped playing and parents held their children closer. Phones and cameras were raised, capturing the unfolding situation. The atmosphere, which had seemed calm moments before, was now charged with quiet anticipation. James crouched lower for a better angle, whispering excitedly, "Just one more, this will be perfect." He was oblivious to Titan's signals, the flick of an ear, the subtle tension in the legs, the shift of weight. Collins tried to calm the situation with gentle guidance, tapping Titan's reins lightly and giving him subtle cues to relax. But the horse was still alert, ready to respond if necessary. Then a sudden movement from James, a slight lean too far over the barrier, was enough to trigger Titan's instinct. The horse shifted his massive body, one hoof scraping sharply against the cobblestone. The sound was louder than anyone expected, echoing across the parade ground. The crowd gasped. James froze, realizing in an instant that the situation was serious. Collins acted immediately. He placed himself firmly between James and Titan, giving firm but gentle signals to the horse. "Step back now," he shouted, his voice carrying authority and urgency. James stumbled slightly, trying to regain balance. His heart pounded in his chest, adrenaline rushing through him. He had ignored the warnings before, and now he could see clearly how close he had come to real danger. Titan reacted instinctively. One massive hoof lifted and stomped the cobblestones just a few inches from where James had been standing moments before. The sound was powerful, sending vibrations through the ground. James stumbled backward, his hands flailing briefly to steady himself, and bumped into the barricade. A few tourists gasped aloud, some snapping photos, others frozen in shock. For a few seconds, time seemed to stretch. James's mind raced. He realized how reckless he had been, how his curiosity and excitement had nearly caused an accident. The realization hit him hard. This was not just a horse. It was a living, powerful animal, trained for discipline but capable of defending itself instinctively if it felt threatened. Collins remained calm but vigilant, keeping Titan under control with subtle but firm movements. The horse's ears flicked forward again, his breathing steadying as the guard guided him back into a relaxed stance. The crowd began to murmur, relieved that no one had been hurt. James, however, felt a mix of shock, embarrassment, and awe. He had come to admire the ceremonial horses and the royal guards, but now he truly understood their power and importance. James's friend rushed to his side. "Are you okay?" they asked, worry evident in their voice. James nodded shakily. "Yeah, I think so." "That was close," he admitted. He looked at Titan, who now stood quietly, ears forward, calm under the careful guidance of Collins. James felt a deep respect for the horse in that moment. Titan was magnificent, disciplined, and intelligent, and James had been foolish to test his patience. The crowd, sensing that the danger had passed, slowly returned to their normal activities. Children pointed at the horses, parents whispered to each other, and tourists continued taking photos from a safe distance. The scene resumed its ceremonial rhythm, but James could not shake the feeling of how narrowly he had avoided an accident. Collins approached James once again, this time speaking calmly but seriously. "Sir, it's important to remember that these horses are trained for discipline, but they are still very powerful. They can sense energy and movement, and even small actions can startle them." Always respect the barriers and the instructions of the guards. James nodded earnestly, realizing that this lesson was one he would never forget. The experience left a lasting impression on him. He had come seeking adventure and photos, but he had encountered something far more important, a lesson in respect, patience, and awareness. The power of the ceremonial horses and the professionalism of the guards had prevented an accident, and James knew that he had been lucky. As he stepped back to a safe distance, James reflected on the events of the morning. He realized that admiration alone was not enough. Curiosity needed to be tempered with caution. Rules and boundaries were not obstacles. They were protections, designed to keep everyone safe, including the animals. He felt a newfound respect for both the horses and the guards who had dedicated their lives to maintaining these traditions. James slowly raised his camera again, this time keeping a safe distance. He captured Titan and the other horses in all their glory, focusing on the majesty and discipline rather than trying to get dangerously close. Each click of the camera now felt different, more meaningful. He was no longer just a tourist chasing a perfect photo. He was a witness to tradition, strength, and careful balance. The rest of the morning passed without incident. The guards performed their duties flawlessly, the horses moved gracefully, and the crowd enjoyed the ceremonial display. James stayed at a respectful distance, watching, learning, and taking photographs that reflected the true beauty of the event. He understood that what made the scene so remarkable was not just the visual spectacle, but the combination of discipline, training, and respect that made it possible. By the time he left Horse Guards Parade, James carried with him more than photographs. He carried a story of awe, caution, and respect. He had learned that power and beauty, when combined with discipline, demanded careful attention. Curiosity could lead to wonder, but recklessness could lead to danger. The memory of Titan's eyes, the guard's calm authority, and the lesson he had learned would remain with him forever. As he walked away, James whispered to himself, "I will never forget this." He knew that in the future he would approach similar situations with more thought and care. He had been lucky that day, but the experience had changed him. It had taught him the value of boundaries, the importance of discipline, and the respect that living beings, no matter how majestic, deserve.